Hello, this is Janet Gallen welcoming you to Love Letters Live. Today's guest is someone that I believe the entire country and their children and their grandchildren know, Alison Arngrim, who was, I know you've done a lot of work, different things, but would you say that you're most well known for being Nellie Oleson?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I knew that was going to happen. I mean, I always joked about the fact, they buried Bella Lugosi in the Cape. Uh, so, yes, I realized it was probably about the third year of the show. We realized that we had a hit, that somehow this thing it just wasn't going away. And then after the show and the DVDs and everything else. And yes, I'm absolutely, no matter what I do. And the same thing. I mean, Melissa Gilbert, for the rest of her life, everyone will call her Half Pint. So yes.
I guess so, but well, just to start a little farther back, just to tell you that I, of course, watched Little House with my daughters who are now in, 50, they're older, they're almost your age. And it was just a ritual that would not be foregone for any reason whatsoever. And now my granddaughter, who read the books first, is now watching them on television. You are
Perfect.
you are a constant in people's lives down the generations. I want to know what you think of having put a living important character on this earth.
Yeah, it is a huge honor. And I mean, part of why Little House resonates, and still after all these years, it's on in 140 countries, it's the unending.
Really? Yes.
As I say, it's not like having been on a TV show in the 70s. It's like having been in The Wizard of Oz or something. It's just they hear the people over and over and over again.
Right.
And you got the fact that it was, based on the books, based on real historical characters. So you have that generation read. You always will have generations reading the books, and
Right.
then that ties to the show as well. But people have passed it on. They watch it with their kids. So we're on our like sixth, seventh generation of viewers. It just keeps going. And I think that's it. So knowing even at the time we were playing people who had walked the earth and been written about
Oh,
in the
so
book.
that's different. That okay. So as
That,
opposed to
you know,
Fonzie or Alex.
Right. But I have to admit, I fonzied the heck out of that role because, when you read the books, okay, so Nellie appears in Walnut Grove. She didn't have that big a part. She has like two chapters really. But even then, people wrote to Laura Ingalls and said, we need more Nellie. What happened to Nellie? So she kind of fudged the numbers in Little Town on the Prairie. It was really a girl named Genevieve Masters. Nellie never moved to South Dakota, but she decided to say, Nellie also did this and this and this. So even she had to put more Nellie in. But when they started the show, they weren't sure how huge a character Nellie or the Olsons would be. There's really no Mrs. Olson in the books. It's just they mention Nels Olson, they mention the children. Um, but Michael saw how the town could lend itself to being more
Okay.
television
So
friendly.
what?
Yeah, and so the character got. But then I started playing her, and that was the thing is I would read. They would have something in the script, and I would say, okay, how far can I take this? And then I get more outrageous each week.
Oh, so
And
you were aware of that early on. I,
yeah,
I kind of want to ask about that because
yeah.
I'm one of the audience members who looks at a character and believes that's the real thing.
Oh dear.
It would be a shock to me to know that Nellie Oleson, there was an actress who played that. Nellie Oleson wasn't her own standing. Um, yes. So what was it that was so, you couldn't have had that story without Nellie Oleson, not on television, you couldn't have.
Right, right.
What was so important about her to you?
I think, well, absolutely, because here you had this family that was so nice, and it was the same reason that Laura wound up keep playing her up more than she was going to originally in the books, as people wanted that antagonist. And in the show, Michael saw very clearly. That's why instead of doing like the Ingalls out in Kansas, Little House, where he went with on the banks of Plum Creek for the basis, because he had a town, you had a teacher and a store and a bank and a mill. You had people, and there was.
Hi there. I think we just froze a little. I'm going to wait till you come back. We might have to just start over.
Sassy and these
Okay.
people, they all kind of went away. They were in the books, but TV wise, nothing was happening with those characters. But I really went for it as Nellie, and well, I guess I made her kind of exciting. And suddenly it was more Nellie, and people really love Nellie. And
Okay, so
it
who did
did
she speak for? I mean,
well.
I know who she spoke for, all of us.
There were the people who watched Little House and said, "Oh, it's a good show, but everybody's so nice. It's so icky, sicky, poo, saccharine." Except when the Olsons are on. Then the Olsons are on. That Harriet and that Nellie. I'll watch when they're on. People love that. They like the spice. They like somebody there for Laura to fight with. It made it exciting.
Well, I think there's something more to it, being your audience member. I think that, you talk about learning to live life as the prairie bitch, and she wasn't an evil girl. I mean, Hannibal Lecter was evil. Nellie Oleson was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, she was bratty, but she wasn't evil. She was bratty. And I think that you could see that she was uncomfortable with something. What do you think?
Indeed. I mean, one of the references that had been in the book's original character of Nellie saying, my family's not from here. My family's not from here. We're from back east.
Uh,
I think, and as a teenager playing the role, it was easy to say, well, if I lived in Walnut Grove, well, I'd be bored myself.
uh,
So that she was bored out of her mind. She really wished they lived in the big city. She didn't want to be in this boring little town. And obviously, her mother, the brilliant Catherine McGregor playing that character, was just so annoying and over the top. She couldn't stand her mother. Mother drove her crazy. It was
and
over.
her mother adored her, which you
Right.
could tell by the attention to those corkscrew curls.
And that's but just the constant spoiling and the smothering. So
Yeah.
yes, she was rebelling. She was just so mad and so disgusted with everyone. And you also, something that had happened kind of in the books and definitely played up in the show, was Nellie was sort of ruling over the school. She was the rich, popular girl. And this Laura Ingalls shows up out of nowhere. And Laura, in real life, Laura was quite popular at school. Laura made friends and people liked her, and she was a natural leader. So Laura shows up and people like her and they want to play with games with her and they want her to say, I think we should play Ring Around the Rosie. And they're going for this. And Nellie's head is exploding because why? Why did she's poor? She's not even rich. She's poor. Look at that dress.
Oh.
This girl from nowhere. How dare she? How
So
dare
the very thing she thought that she was competing for
And to boot, she meets the family, and well, Laura's family is nice.
to
Her
her.
parents are perfect. Laura's parents are absolutely perfect. They're so loving. They're so adorable. Her father, well, he's Pa Ingalls and Ma, and they're wonderful. And wouldn't Nellie have loved to have had a mother like Ma Ingalls or a father like Pa, not her parents? So I was going with jealous rage.
How did you know to do that? You started this when you were 12, right? This particular was that your first acting job?
No, I've been working. That's what's so funny. I've been working since I was like 6 years old, and I'd done commercials. I did a movie when I was 10 where I
And what
played.
was that?
It was called Throw Out the Anchor, and I played a perfectly nice little girl. In fact, people who've seen it, even who've seen clips, going, "How come you didn't play Laura? You're like a lovely little child in this. You could have been." And I play a nice little girl, but the movie it was a very cheap, silly movie. It didn't go anywhere. It's about a family going to get a houseboat in Florida, and it was very silly. But I did that. But here's the kicker: I didn't work a lot after the movie, and my father was my manager, and he said, "We thought you'd work more after the movie. You're not booking anything." And a
And
lot of
your parents wanted you to work more?
oh yeah. Well, the whole family was in show business. Was
Yeah,
considered.
I just learned that recently. Why don't go back a little and talk about that, because it was apparently a really significant show business family.
Well, my mother was the a voiceover. She was Casper the Friendly Ghost. She was Gumby. She was Sweet Polly Purebred, Underdog's girlfriend. She was Davy of Davy and Goliath. She was everybody. She was this huge cartoon person. She was on, and you probably remember this, the first Family album where they made fun of JFK and Jackie and the whole
I do.
family.
Oh, yes.
And it was huge. It was Von Meter was the comedian at the time who did JFK. He was very big at the time, and it was this marvelous, hilarious album all about the Kennedys. It was a huge deal in
I do
1960.
remember that, actually.
Well, my mother was Caroline and John. She did the voices of the kids in the sketches, and it was huge. So she was in voiceover land. She was big. She was
So
big.
it was just always assumed by you? I mean, it was a natural thing that you would be ending up in this world for your career?
Like everyone I knew was in show business, literally.
It
And
was
then my
a
father,
natural step ahead.
yeah, my parents had met in the theater, and then my father had become a manager, and he actually worked for Seymour Heller and Associates, who managed Liberace and Debbie
Wow.
Reynolds. And so it was showbiz. And so he was managing me, and he said, many child actors do not work later. They stop and they don't work till they're 18 or they never work again. And
Mhm.
he was kind of preparing me that my career might be over. And then it
And
was,
did he do that with sympathy and understanding, or was he
yeah, a
that's
little bit. He was very matter of fact. He's like, look, as my daughter, I want to prepare you for the worst, but also as a client, it could be over. You're really not getting any work. The reality is, you don't get your hopes up, because many people, this is it. They work a bunch as a little kid and then they stop working. He said, and that's a reality. So just in case, that could be it. And then I got Little House, of course, a year later. So I've always,
how did you understand at the age of 12? And I was trying to think if I would understand that also. I don't know. How did you understand what went into making Nellie Oleson tick? How did you understand about meanness, or about how did you understand about that kind of discomfort that
oh
you
yeah.
could, uh-huh.
Well, I mean, that was the thing. So when I always say Little House was the comeback role that I technically had a whole career was washed up, and that was the comeback. So in a way it was, but yeah, well, I was quite, I was an actress, and I knew I liked villains. I knew from fantasy and reality, because I knew my mom wasn't a talking ball of clay, or a ghost. But the character, when I got there, and they hadn't told me anything. That was the funny thing. The audition, I didn't know. I got there, and as soon as I read the sides, I went, "Oh, she's awful." Oh, yeah. And that's when I found out she was mean. And I immediately, I just connected to it, that she was this snob, that she was
And
grand.
what part of you connected to that? Do you know, or is that not relevant?
I knew those people. I had been very mistreated as a child. I had been abused as a child. I had been bullied horribly at school. I was not that
Really?
popular when I was little. And I knew from,
Something, if it's not too personal. I mean, I also had some experience with bullies, but there's no accounting for what makes them tick, rotten as they are. But so the abuse as a child and the bullying, you just kept that inside?
I did not talk about it, right? I didn't talk about any of that until I was an adult.
Oh, really?
And but I knew what I'd seen these people. I had been the Laura, I had been mistreated, and I knew like what it was like, these kind of people who could look at you, and the way that Nellie would talk, and she'd want to sort of drive the knife. And there's an episode, The Music Box, where Nellie picks on the stuttering girl.
Oh,
I call that the episode where even I hate me. It's so mean. It's so awful. But I totally understood. Well, I understood. It was like weird. It was like being on the opposite side. But when she's going, I can't hear you, say it faster. And it's just like,
oh, yes.
ah, but
But
I knew.
those are such good lessons for our children. Oh, so I have a thought that you
Yeah.
can learn a lot of real compassion from seeing the ick
Yes. Yes.
and knowing that that's a bad way to behave, I guess. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things people say, but how come like in person you're nice? You're like really nice. And even during the show, people used to say, it's so funny, the girl who plays Nellie's like the nicest person here. I don't know. And yeah, I understood. I understood cruelty. I understood cruelty. I had been the victim of cruelty. I knew what it looked like. I'd seen it up close.
And you were
And
an actress.
and in acting it out and
Right.
seeing it, I mean, the poor girl, Katie Kurtzman, the actress who played the stuttering girl, lovely actress, doesn't really stutter in real life, wonderful girl. And we became friends. But it was for me watching her crying, and just I was going, man, this is really awful. But I knew how it was done. I knew that awful cruelty.
Mm.
And it's the woman who took me to the set every day because my parents were all working. Auntie Marion had been painfully shy, and she understood what it was like to be shy, and she was very kind, super compassionate woman who helped people all the time. So I had her sort of a role model, and I understood that there were people who were shy, who stuttered, who were mistreated by people, and I absolutely felt terrible and wanted to help people if anything. And
Sure.
I knew what it was to have someone treat you like dirt, like Nellie did. And
You
I
know,
just
I actually had in grammar school, um, she was actually a good friend, but a dangerous friend. Yes, for this reason of, and she had the corkscrew curls. She had, and she was beautiful, blue eyes. She was a very beautiful child. And her mother, I guess, paid her the kind of ruinous attention that Nellie Oleson got paid couldn't
Yep.
be perfect enough. And she harbored a lot of discomfort and expectations, and she was nasty.
Yeah. So you've seen it. You've seen it in action. You've seen it
That's right.
live in
I mean,
person.
now that we're talking, yes, yeah,
And I think that's one of the things about the show. Everyone had someone like everyone had a Nellie at
I
their
guess
school,
so.
and everyone had a Mrs. Olson at their job or that they had to do business with. And so people knew people went, they'd watch the show. And I've asked people from other countries when I say, why would Little House on the Prairie, it's so American, resonate with you in Sri Lanka or
Uh-huh.
Borneo or Iraq? And they say, oh no, the family, the Ingalls, they were poor. They had a lot of kids and lived in a tiny house, and they were constantly almost going to make it and hardly ever had money. And then they had those awful people at the store, that rich lady at the store, and they're like, this is people's lives. This is how most people are living. We could
Yeah.
identify.
So the truth of the matter is, Me Too goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone can identify with that. Yes. And I do have another question. Well, I read that you had done a production all in French, and I forget where that was.
My parents were Ma and Pa Ingalls, and I feel better about my life. People were really investing emotionally in this show. And I think
For
that's
sure.
why it stuck around. They really got into it.
What about, did you grow up speaking French? I read in something, and by the way, I try not to know too much before we talk because I like things to be fresh. Um, but I did read that you did a performance. Was it a play that you did all in French?
Very crazy. I did not speak French as a child, although my family are Canadian.
I read that.
If I'd been raised in Canada, I probably would have, because but they were Western Canadian. So unless
Right.
you're in Vancouver, Western Canada, if you work at a bank or for the government, you speak French. But otherwise, so I
Really?
did
Okay.
French growing up. If I, Central Canada or Eastern Canada, I would have. But but my, like my aunt and my mother, I think I forget how many languages. My aunt I know sang in 8 languages. I
Oh,
remember
well,
that.
okay. So you see that obviously at opera.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
see
Because she
people
sang in
living
opera,
an
so she
entire
sang.
opera
And,
in
right, and my mom was an opera freak.
German, and they're Americans. Or
My Yeah,
uh-huh.
my mother had a passing, knowledge of Italian and German, et cetera, and French. She was an opera buff, but I didn't speak French, and I took French in school, and I was not really that good at it. I got through the days of the week and some things, but then I always wanted to go to France. I love the idea of France. I loved French food. I liked French this. I like French movies. I just did French everything. So I finally get this call to go to France. 40 years old. I finally come to France. We're doing a talk show. Come be the, and had the thing in my ear. They didn't expect me to speak French, but it was amazing because on the talk show they started talking about Nellie, and one of them said, oh, Nellie was a child without a smile, and how they sympathized. They poor Nellie, she couldn't help herself. Obviously, she was jealous, and I thought this is pretty cool. So I wind up going back, and I met this guy, Patrick Lubatière, and he's a writer and teacher and a chess champion, but he'd written a book about Little House. And we were talking, and he said, after I'd met him a couple of times, he'd come out to LA, I'd come out to France. He said, we can do your comedy show, your stand-up show you do. We can do it in
Yes.
French. But he says, I'll have to rewrite the whole thing. He said, because you have jokes that don't make any sense. They don't translate. So we can take this part and this part work. This piece at the end totally works. This
And
joke here.
also, something else, and to be dramatic in another language,
Yeah.
to be funny in another language, you're asking for trouble.
Yes. And so he
Okay.
says, I said, really? He goes, well, he says, we do a show, we kind of break it up a little. He said, I'll come out and talk, sort of introduce you, explain why she's here, blah, 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 the American actress. And then we show like a Little House clip. And then you come out and you tell like that first story from the beginning of your act. That's fine. That'll translate to French. You do that. Then we show another clip, and then you get a rest. And then you come out, and we work this thing out. So we do this show, and it was crazy because I didn't really speak French. I just started learning, and he'd never done theater before. He's right here, but he'd never done. So suddenly he's on stage, and I'm speaking French, and neither of us know what the heck we're doing. And it was a smash. People loved it. So we said, I guess we have to figure out what we're actually doing here. So we both learned how to do this. I went back to school. I learned to speak French properly.
Oh,
He
good for you.
figured out. I went to Alliance de Française in Pasadena,
Uh-huh.
and he started learning like which end of the stage to stand on, and got a little better. And he was pretty funny naturally, but then he like figured out, oh, that's where the joke is. Yes, there. The thing became a hit. He wrote a second show. We did a Confession d'une garce de la Prairie, and then he wrote a second show, Le Mal au Trésor de Nellie Oleson, Nellie Olson's Trunk of Treasures. Sort
Uh-huh.
of interactive with the audience. We take a trunk into the audience. Craziness. He's working on a third show right now. So I started doing this, and then during these shows, the shows started to catch on. We got a call. We met this guy on a talk show, a director, Jean-Pierre Mocky, who's a very famous director in France. He just passed away just a couple years ago. Very big. And I was on a talk show with him, and we hit it off. It was like chemistry. And so Patrick corners him, goes, "You've got to put her in one of the movies." And then he did. He calls him back and goes, "Okay, I was doing this one movie, but none of the French actors wanted to even work with an American, let alone some ex-child star. But my next movie, I got this guy. He doesn't mind. He says it'll be great." So she's in this movie. So next thing I know, I'm back in France, and I did a movie completely in French.
Good
Also
for
a
you.
comedy,
Yes.
with the famous Jean-Pierre Mocky, with Jean-Francois Stevenin and a bunch of famous French actors. And it was the nuttiest thing I've like ever done. And then I continued to do the show. So I have this whole basically second career. Wow. And I just got back from I was there in January and February, and had just gotten back, and then the pandemic hit, and I
Yeah.
was scheduled to be there in September and October, and unfortunately we had to cancel.
So I have a question that occurred to me earlier today, and then I forgot about it. But I have a friend who's an actor, and we were talking years ago about something, and he said he's a Jew playing a Nazi.
Oh wow, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, hello.
Yeah. Yes, hello. And he said, I said, how do you do that well? He said, you have to like your character in some way in order to. Am I onto something?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
evidently there was something that I'm not making any comparison between Nellie, God forbid, and then, but but
no,
just but the
I
idea of having to like an unlikable character.
it's in acting. They talk about, justification is always a term they throw in acting class, that if you have something that your character is saying or doing and it feels weird, it's like, well, it won't come off as believable. You have to make up whatever story you need to make up to justify this thing that you're doing, that you somehow believe that this is a totally reasonable thing to be saying and doing in this situation. And as much as, yes, I saw Nellie was obviously the villain of the piece, and kind of, oh, haha, she's so terrible. And I did kind of enjoy, like, what awful things am I going to do next? Um, you had to like her. I had to, as an actress, believe that I was right.
Oh,
That
that okay, that's
Yeah,
justification. That's
you had,
different than like she was a very likable
you
character.
kind of like it, but that's because I made her right. If in my head as an actress, I was like, well, this is wrong. I had to, for that moment, believe that I was absolutely within my rights, and it was the correct thing to do to be tormenting this stuttering girl and reduce her to tears. That I was supposed to be doing that. That's a
Interesting.
hell of a jump. And
Yeah,
all these dreadful things, I had to be like, yes, of course I'm going to tell Laura that her father smells, because he does.
that is really an interesting task. I think the whole business of acting, of course, is an interesting task. To take on something that you're not.
And you mentioned the Jewish man playing Nazi. The guy who was the soup Nazi on Seinfeld. Very
Right.
nice man, lovely person. He also, in addition to playing a guy who was called a soup Nazi, played Saddam Hussein in a
Oh,
film, and someone else, another Middle Eastern terrorist person. And of course, his Jewish mother said, "So first, you got a job playing someone called the Nazi, and now you're playing Saddam Hussein, and now you're playing." She's like, Why? What is the problem? Can you not play just a nice Jewish man? What is wrong?" It's like, he
well,
says,
you get called for that role. I mean, it's not like you necessarily go after it.
No, he said they would always call very dark and swarthy. He said, constantly trying to explain to my poor Jewish mother why I was playing these parts. It's been
Yeah,
very difficult.
yeah.
So yes, this happens a lot. And he has played many villainous, sort of unpleasant people, and these are the loveliest people you could meet. Yeah, when in playing Nellie, and I also did a play a few years ago where I played an extremely objectionable woman. But you have to, at some point in the character, you have to say, yep,
You
yep, the
take
thing
you
that
take
I'm
you
doing
take it
is
on. Yeah.
I'm
So,
supposed Laura is a terrible person and she deserves what I'm doing to her.
so
Yes.
you have to be able to take it on and be comfortable with the, icky. I have a question to ask you about, um, I know that you're busy in the daytimes, I understand from Harlan, that you're reading to children.
Oh, apparently the number of adults who are tuning in. What has started with literally, I didn't know what to do in March when this hit. I was supposed to go to France. I was supposed to go to Ireland.
Mhm.
I had a multiple. There were autograph shows. There was my stand-up show I was doing in New York in May. I was booked solid really through October, and all of that went poof in a puff of smoke on
Right.
basically March 13th. So there I am sitting on the floor going, I do. And I have no job and I don't know where I'm going. Oh, and I also had all my merchandise. I had all my bonnets and my books and my autographable pictures and
You
things.
have bonnets.
Yes, I have lovely bonnets because I was ready to go on all these autograph shows and
Oh,
things.
for you to wear as your,
Oh,
oh,
no, people
oh,
love them. I autograph them and they get them. And I had books and autograph pictures, all my merchandise. And I thought, "Now, what am I going to do? This is awful." And my husband, of course, is still working. He got his job involves construction and infrastructure. It's a whole thing down at the airport. So he was like essential employee. So he's like, "Hey, I'm still going to work tomorrow." Yes. Okay, great. And I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" And he said, "You'll think of something." I said, "Oh, great." So then I thought, I don't know what to do. But then I thought, well, wait, I got to come up with something to do. And not even thinking of going online, I said, I'm going to go back and reread the Little House on the Prairie books. I hadn't read them in ages. I'd read them, but
oh.
hadn't read them in years. And I thought, you know what?
The sound just disappeared. Your sound disappeared.
Trying to talk to me. That's why. Wait, here. Can you hear me now, as they
Yes,
say?
ma'am, I can. Okay.
Why am I muted? Hold on. No, I shouldn't be muted.
No,
I
you're
can't
good now.
hear
You're
you
good
for a
now.
second. I don't know why
It-
not.
It's okay.
Hello? Can you hear me? No.
Yes, I can hear you. Now I can't hear you.
Oh, there you are again. I can hear you now. Sorry, that was weird.
Okay, that's okay. Listen, we're at the mercy of, new technology. So,
Internet goes bonkers. But yeah, I wasn't sure. I said, I'll reread the books. I haven't read them in years. And I'll start with Little House in the Big Woods and read them in order and see how the characters develop, how like Nellie shows up and how
to whom
Laura.
are you reading them?
Hmm?
To whom are you reading them?
Well, initially, I was seriously going to sit home and just read them myself. And then I thought, well, everybody else is stuck at home. I'll go on Facebook Live and
Oh, how nice.
I'll say, hey, I'm going to read a book. Anybody? Because I saw my friends were starting to go on Facebook and going, and some of them were just saying, hi, is anyone there? This is my quarantine diary. Sometimes they were just depressed and going, I didn't talk to anyone. And then I saw Patrick Stewart was reading Shakespeare sonnets. And I thought, what the
How,
heck?
oh.
I'll go. So, and of course I thought, well, I've got the bonnets too. So I would pick a
So
bonnet
we can all tune in and listen to you do this on Facebook.
every day at 1:30. What I would do is I would usually pick a bonnet that like went with whatever, shirt I was wearing. And I'd put on my bonnet and I get the camera all set up like this and I have snacks and I started reading the books and I said, chapter 1, page 1. And people tuned in droves. They kept going back. It was thousands and thousands of views. I was like, what?
Tell us how to do that. Tell us how to tune in.
Go to Facebook, go to my page, Alison Arngrim. I've set it up so you can just hit follow, even because you can only have so many friends. You follow and just set to public. And at 1:30 every day, I got a book and a bonnet. Currently, I'm reading. I got through all the books. I read all 9 books, and then I kept going. I started reading like historical things about Laura. I'm reading the Pioneer Girl, which is Laura's real autobiography that she.
Oh, this is wonderful. So you're just getting to educate and
We're doing history lessons. We're reading this stuff about the real Laura, and I do it every day. And people went nuts. I mean, we're talking 40,000 people and stuff watching.
I'm sure.
And they went mad. And then, of course, people called and said, well, we know you can't do the club stand-up. Would you like to do your stand-up show as a pay-per-view online? You do it out of your living room. Oh, I guess I could do that. And now, one thing after another, I did my Halloween show.
So you're busy again, and there's no limits.
Yeah, I'm working like crazy. I have all these shows and things, and I do the cameo thing. I do a thing called Coach the World. I did a women's conference in Ireland, the thing I couldn't go to. Well, they did it online, and I did my.
Isn't it just a miracle what we can do? Well, let me ask you something, because I am about love letters.
Yes, do
and you know, writing them. And I always, every one of life's experiences, whether it's good or terrible, has within it the seeds of a love letter to someone. And yes, even if it's to yourself for having survived something, you know. But you must have a boatload of letters that people have written you.
The letters, the emails, the Facebook messages, etc.
Well, I'm talking about just actual letters where you can see children's handwriting and.
Oh yes, people write. When they write to the hard copy letters, what we do here when I get fan mail is my husband. We do staged readings. I sit on the couch and he opens. Today's letter is from, and sometimes they're quite funny. Sometimes, like maybe they're from Japan and they use Google Translate to try to write in English and it's not quite working and it's kind of hilarious. So he'll get it and he will do a stage reading of the letter and we'll go, yes, that's very good. Okay. And then we, give them a picture or what have you. Yes.
Isn't that a wonderful thing, really, to get letters?
It is. And I get beautiful things from children. I just got a gift thing. People make stuff. That's the big thing. Everyone's making things and sending.
For you?
This quilt on the chair. This woman made this quilt and sent this to me. Beautiful, beautiful things. And some are little things kids made and some are just gorgeous, huge art things grown-ups made.
Oh, that's because you are part of all our families. Yes. So my daughter, when I mentioned that we were going to be talking, she said, and she's 51, everything. She said, please give her my love.
Oh, well, send her my love. There. Right?
Who doesn't? I want to thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
So many questions answered, things I've been curious about. And you are just one of the loveliest women around. It's a miracle that you could play that little brat.
Thank you.
Thank you,
but
dear.
I enjoyed it because it was also so many times, as I've talked about, when you're a child actor, they want you to be perfect, to play a sweet little girl and be like,
right,
almost a little too good. Like, who's that good all the time? And here I was playing someone who was in a bad mood, who wasn't that good. And I thought, well, sort of
what a relief.
Freeing.
Yes.
And to let it all out, all the angst, it was kind of fun. And now it's also fun because it's fair every day. It's hilarious. I laugh and because people every day say something. Oh, you were hurt. Oh, I just hated you. Oh, I just. Oh, I love it. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And the things people say to me, and then like, no, actually, I'm relatively nice. Hi, how are you? It's a daily occurrence, and
because that's a tribute to how good you are. That people really do believe that is you. Sure.
And I'm able to play out because the character of Nellie was also sort of funny because she was foolish in many ways. And that's been really fun. If I'd played a very, very serious character, or if I'd been super nice, I don't think I'd be able to have quite as much fun with it as I'm having with it now.
I'm sure. Well, thank you. You've put somebody very important on the Earth's landscape.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. So I'm just going to tell you goodbye for now. If there's anything you want to do or talk about and you feel like coming back, you let me know.
I shall. Thank you.
And until next time, I will just say to everybody goodbye for now for love letters. And mwah.
Mwah. Thank you so much.